Welcome back, Reality Redemption. How you doing, Snow?
Good. How are you?
I am okay. We'll get right into it this week with our normal BS that we usually do, because we have the great Jim Hinkley.
Call me anything but late for dinner.
Yeah. How you been, Jim?
Not too bad. Not too bad at all.
Yeah. So, we're going to be talking about his new book, his last book number 19, if I got that right. Murder and Mayhem on the Main Street of America. Tales from Bloody 66. So, this book came out last year?
Last October.
Yeah. And how's the promotion been on it?
It's like everything this year. It's been off the rails. It's it's like trying to sell tickets to the Titanic sometimes, but you just got to keep going. It's learning to sell things more on the internet, e-commerce, and promotion, things like this. Interviews. I just finished an interview this morning with an Irish travel channel. We did it via video. So we'll just keep going that way.
Right, like Zoom?
Yeah, Zoom and Google Meeting and other things that I didn't even know existed until this started.
Yeah, well, I'll have to relearn everything. That's kind of why my fumbling with this podcast and learning the technology here. I bought this nice new mixing board, couldn't get fired up this morning, so we're doing this another way. Maybe I'll just speak up just a little bit. It's a little bit low. So, what led you to write this book?
Everything I do, I try to add depth and context to a subject. And Route 66, we have a tendency to see it in the context of neon and tail fins. And I wanted to take it a little bit deeper, show it that it was the main street of America. And the other part of it, too, is that we have a tendency to look back on the good old days. And the good old days are whenever you're alive and breathing. We've always had dark sides of life.
Let's get into a couple stories on this. Do you have a particular favorite one?
One of the ones that was really interesting was a family in New Mexico that disappeared back in the 1930s. They had a tendency to travel with another couple. I think you might remember this. They were out of East St. Louis, and they would take these big epic trips together every year, these two couples, and they went out to see the new Hoover Dam, Boulder Dam, and then they were going to go down to San Diego. Then they followed Route 66 west, visiting people, sending postcards. They were going to the exposition in San Diego. And they stopped in Vaughn, New Mexico, south of Tucumcari to visit with some people and were never seen again. Wow. And the story got kind of interesting because they interviewed the FBI agent who was in charge of this in the 1940s when he retired. And he said the FBI had put together a file over 10 feet high investigating this. But what made it really difficult and problematic is they were investigating more than a dozen almost identical cases along Route 66 in Arizona and New Mexico between 1936 and 1938.
Snow, you had a particular story that you would
I was just going to say about the book that what I liked a lot is... I'm a union person. I liked how you also talked about like all the union struggle and like the at the beginning of the book, more like in the Chicago area, because there are a lot stronger unions out that way out east. But I liked that, and I liked all the other stories too about like the race situations that were happening during the times too. I liked all the history added into it, and I loved all the historical pictures, like how you were able to get your hands on all those. That was really cool.
Sometimes it just pays to know people in low places.
How long did it take you to write this?
About a year.
About a year.
I try to crank about one a year.
And what was your first book?
My first book was a little book on the Checkered Cab Manufacturing Company.
Oh, wow.
That's another thing that I thought was cool. Like, I had no idea that Hertz started as a cab company.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
And John Hertz also before Checker started manufacturing cars, John Hertz started manufacturing cars as taxis.
Yeah, didn't he start Yellow Cab?
He started Yellow Cab, and then there was, then of course, Checker. The Checker Cab story, even though, it doesn't have to do with this, but the Checker is kind of an intriguing story, speaking of gangsters, mobsters, and letting your imagination go wild. But you mentioned John Hertz. Morris Markin had some questionable connections. He's the fellow who founded Checker. And of course, they had the taxi franchises were fighting, but the companies were also fighting among themselves for a portion of the market. And when John Hertz would not sell his Hertz company, manufacturing company, all of a sudden his stable with prize racehorses went up in flames. And 10 days later, he sold his company. Sold it to General Motors instead of the people who were trying to get the company.
Oh, wow. The pressure was
I love
on.
those stories.
I know. There are so many cool stories like that.
What's the creepiest story you've ever heard that kind of shocks you to your bones? Like, you interviewed these people, you sat down, you talked to them. Like, is there something that still just kind of like rattles your bones?
Well, there's a lot of stories, and we there again, it just goes to show you that some things never change, and there's always people that are just, don't know no other way you can put it, they're just evil people, pure and simple. Mr. Folk was a prime example.
Can we get into that story a little bit? I found that one fascinating.
Yeah, go ahead. What you got?
Well, no, you tell a story on it. Just give us a little
Mr.
basics.
Folk was, that's the one out by Goodwater, Arizona. Raped and murdered a young lady, tied her husband up. He was just a real psychotic, savage person.
Right, and he was stalking them for quite a while.
All the way across New Mexico and Arizona.
Yeah, and then, Snow?
Well, when I started reading the book, too, I was like, I wonder if Bonnie and Clyde had anything to do with this path. And then later, they were talked about in it, too. Because they're always fascinating to read about also.
Well, Bonnie and Clyde, of course, they got a lot of attention. But there were some others that were far more crazy.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. They weren't, they didn't, I don't know why there wasn't attention paid on other people besides just, maybe they were thought to be like more glamorous.
It's always about press and publicity too. The selling newspapers. They pick on a story like this. What'd you have there?
Like, when you interview these people, is there something that just comes along? Like, I was covering the James Rector case, and I just felt this weird vibe of just pure, just kind of like pure evil. But I know the kid got kind of messed up, but like, it was just weird to see this guy in court smirking, and the judge was like, okay, we got to set this back a couple weeks. This guy did some really serious, disgusting stuff. And the guy was like smiling through the whole court case. I'm like, wow. I felt super weird just being like 15 feet from him.
When you say interview, so did you interview some of the killers?
No, but I did talk to some of the families. The kids who were murdered up by, the parents who were murdered up by Seligman back in the 1950s, sleeping in their car. Remember that?
Yes.
And the Welsh family.
Yeah, and he didn't kill the baby, right?
No, the three sons were left.
Okay.
And I talked to two of the sons. And of course, this has stayed with them all their life. But it's, the ripple effects from these people. And what you talked about right there, see, the ripple effects. You just sitting there in the courtroom, you've been affected by this person.
Oh, yeah.
I should mention we have Aaron and Stephanie here. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello.
You didn't say anything yet.
We're back.
They're back again. I had something to that effect. Back in the day, my mom worked in a rehab in New Hampshire. And do you remember Stephen King's bike accident? Back in I think it was in the 80s.
Is that the one where he got hit by a van?
Yeah, he got hit by a van. Well, he got addicted to painkillers So he went to rehab. My mother had to do the intake meeting on him. And what you're saying is you get a vibe of creepy people. He said that she was interviewing him and he was not looking at her, but it was like it was looking into her. She said it was the creepiest thing. And I was a big Stephen King fan at the time. I'm like, Mom, how can we take my copy of Pet Sematary and have him sign it?
Right?
People who write horror stuff have got to be pretty fucked to begin with. So.
Speaking of getting books signed, how come you didn't have Jim sign our books?
We're going to do that here.
We didn't-
Okay.
He's right.
Yeah, it's more personal this way.
I deface the books. Joking about defacing books, but writing, you know how this works. I mean, writing is... that's why I have a side job, to pay for the writing habit. But I did a book signing one time up at Hastings. And the book sold out, and they didn't have any others. But I made a deal with Hastings, and that if people would order the book, pay for it, and then I'd drive by Hastings every day. I'd stop in and sign their books for them. And I got about a week later. I never got a call from Hastings, but about a week later, I stopped in the store, and there was all the books lined up on the top of the shelf.
Oh my God.
So I asked the lady, I says, I'll sign all these books because some of these I know are sold. She said, well, I'll have to ask the manager. We just can't have random people come in here and deface books.
Do they want your ID or something?
As a matter of fact, they did, yes.
I'm the guy that wrote the book.
I'm going to go
I
sign all
it.
these books over here.
I know.
wrong
Who
with
would
people?
randomly just do that?
Who doesn't know Jim Hinkley? I mean, come on.
And how'd you
Right?
like the nice dentist out of St. Louis? The one who was prolific.
Oh, yeah.
Killing people for over 10, 12, 14, 15 years.
They say the dentists are creepy like that. And I was like, yeah. The one that I thought was like the grossest one out of the kid one was the one where they had her like wrapped up, but it was only part of her. She was already dead, but they made like they had her head and other parts of her were gone.
Yeah, Los Angeles.
That one was awful.
And the Bobby Greenlease killing and kidnapping back in the 50s, that really shocked everybody because, they just cold-blooded kidnapped and killed the kid and pretended like he was alive and tried to collect the money.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminded me of that case kind of because they wanted ransom for the twin girl.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about how could they even how could the school let her go because they didn't realize that she was a twin or something, and he just said he asked for the daughter.
Well, you get into things and people are capable of some pretty dark things. One, you mentioned interviews. Of course, I couldn't really interview some of these people, but when I started reading the newspaper accounts and some of the journals written by the newspaper reporters, the East St. Louis race riots in 1917, 18, it's just astounding that people would line up on a bridge and shoot at people trying to swim across the river. The killings. I mean, stabbing people with ice picks, and on the street. It just and then go back to business as normal.
Yeah.
This is an accepted part of life. The Tulsa race riots in the Greenwood district.
Yeah, I like that you covered that, and the fact that you talked about how most people there don't like to talk about it. That's true. Like I watched a documentary, and both sides were sitting there saying that no one really will talk about the incident. They don't want to talk about it.
Well, this is, on Route 6, we have a tendency there again to go back, that we see the 1950s in the context of neon and tail fins. And I do not mean this as a political statement at all, but we also forget, when we talk about Route 66 in the glory days, it depends on what color you are. The Negro motorist for the Green Book, things of that nature. We only had one property in Kingman that was listed in the Green Book for the Negro motorist.
Which one was that?
The White Rock Court.
Oh, okay.
Down here.
We've all heard that myth of that sign that was supposedly out of town. Was that myth or is that real?
Well,
thing?
that's a running thing. Andy Sampson and I do programs together every once in a while. We've talked about that a lot. Almost everybody who's lived in Kingman for more than 50 years swears the sign's true and they've seen it, but they've never seen it in the same location.
Right.
It's kind of like the Clark Gable and Carol Lombard stories. You tell a story long enough.
Yeah, we'll get into that one in just a minute. Jim, where can they find your book?
Well, JimHinkley'sAmerica.com. Amazon carries all my books.
Okay.
And then if they're local, do they sell them in the museums
they
or
won't.
anything?
They do have
gift
some of my books in the Mojave Museum of History and Arts gift shop. They do not sell them at the Powerhouse, and Calico's does sell my books here in Kingman.
Is Calico's open again?
It was the other day.
Okay.
Yeah, they open it.
And I saw a bunch of your books just up as you're going up 66 towards Valentine, that little general store.
Oh, the Hackberry General
Oh,
Store.
that- yeah.
Yeah. We had a bunch of your books there too. But, for those listening, because we have people from around the country actually listen to this, that, check out Jim Hinkley's America. Buy the book on Amazon. It's a really good book.
Thank you. We had a few things like the mayor of Santa Rosa, who was a murderer. And,
I want to go there to that blue hole.
The Blue Hole is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's one of the few places on Route 66 that is aptly named. It's a big blue hole.
Yeah.
Unlike Uranus
Not
Fudge Company, the Big Blue Hole really is a big blue hole.
Not a very creative name, though, is it?
What's that?
I still want to go jump
Big
in it.
blue hole.
That's what it is.
Not very creative, though.
But,
With a different name for it then.
I had a question just about Route 66 because I've never traveled the whole thing, but I watched before I had read your book, like about a week before I had watched this thing where a guy traveled with his father just showing people the different spots along Route 66. And it seems like in the state of Oklahoma, they've kept up their part of Route 66 really nicely. Like as far as lots of museums and stuff, I was just wondering if that's what it seemed when I watched the documentary, like that it is a good place to go if you want to check out the museums.
Yeah, Oklahoma, and there's a couple states that have done extremely well. They've tapped into Route 66 as a catalyst for tourism, economic development, and community revitalization. And they've sold everything on the hog, including the squeal. They've just figured out how to do this. And Oklahoma's done a pretty good job. Illinois has really been exceptional. Missouri's starting to pick up pretty good. You're starting to see more young people involved with this club.
I went last year. I stopped in Cuba, Missouri, a place that you've been involved in, and by your recommendation, and I just love that little town.
Cuba is an amazing little town on all levels. I do not know of any town that small. It's about 3,500 people, and towns that are 5 times larger that they don't have that many eclectic, fascinating, and good restaurants. It's astounding, and they've got one of the just an incredible industrial and business park there.
And the murals are incredible there.
The whole walking tour for the murals downtown. Like I say, the restaurants are all top notch. Every restaurant I've tried there has been very good. They're all different. A lot of intriguing people there. It's just a nice town with strong community spirit.
And so what got you involved in Route 66, the love affair?
Now, if you want to edit this and include the Twilight Zone music, please feel free.
Snow can do that.
Love that.
That's my thing.
But pretty much everything in my life since about 1959 has been tied to Route 66. And yes, I am that old. We made our first trip west out here to Arizona in '59 from Virginia. Followed a lot of Route 66.
What part of Virginia?
My dad was stationed in Norfolk.
Okay, I lived in Virginia Beach for a few years.
Virginia. I've been there, done that.
And I was, of course, pretty young, don't really remember much about the trip. And then in the summer of '66, my pa got out of the military, and he'd been Navy and then Coast Guard on the Great Lakes. He was World War II vet, Navy, and then Coast Guard on the lakes. And then he'd been, he said no more. He'd done with the water, done with the ocean, done with all of that. I'm not imaginative enough to make this up. He folded a map so there was no coast, no lakes, and threw a dart. Yucca, Arizona was the closest. So just like some Beverly Hillbillies thing, we loaded up. We lived in Port Huron, Michigan at the time, and we drove to just south of Chicago, picked up Route 66, and came out here. And if it wasn't enough to move out here, my dad had bought property sight unseen. It was supposed to be this beautiful land development, all this. It was out on Oatman Road down at the bottom of the valley. And it was a land boondoggle and a half out there. So not only did we move to Kingman, which I thought this was a place they warned me about in Sunday school, but we ended up out on Oatman Road down at the bottom of the valley. And you ever see the movie Old Brother, Where Art Thou?
I love that movie.
Yeah.
Well, that was my mom's family down south out of Sand Mountain, Alabama. So I'd spend my summers on my folks' farms down in Monteagle, Tennessee, and Scottsboro, Dutton, Alabama, and down in that country. So I was used to, just like the people in Old Brother, Where Art Thou? I mean, I used to that kind of people. Nothing prepared me for the people that were out there in the desert. Dry roasted nuts, pure and
Dry
simple.
roasted nuts.
I always say it's like due to the lack of water around here that it just drives people crazy.
Lack of shade, water, trees, rivers, creeks,
But Kingman,
culture. Yes.
Kingman was a unique place.
A goddamn library.
What was Kingman like back then?
It was really frozen in time, right up until the 1990s. My first weekend in Kingman, when we first come here, we couldn't find the property my dad had bought, and he ended up getting a place out right on the road. And we lived right down here on Maple Street, right on the corner. And first place we lived in. And my first weekend in Kingman, I took my allowance and went down to the State Theater. They were only open on Friday and Saturday nights. And down on the corner down here on Beale Street. And even as a kid, I knew this wasn't right. They were showing Gone with the Wind. It's 1966, and we're getting Gone with the Wind in Kingman. And it was a different town. It was really different. We had 3 barbers downtown, and one, Bob Wall, he cut hair from the 50s into the 90s, same place. And as late as the late 1980s, you'd go in there at 6 in the morning for a haircut. And he'd say, I got one ahead of you. And there's nobody in there. And the police chief would pull up and leave the car running out front while he came and got his haircut. It was like Mayberry. And then we had another barber down the street by the theater around the corner. You could always tell newcomers to Kingman or tourists that got their haircut at his barbershop in the afternoon, because their sideburns would be about 3 inches different and odds and ends. Because the old man, he had a refrigerator behind his barber chair full of Coors beer. And he'd start sipping on beer about 9. And by noon, he'd lock up for 30 minutes an hour and go have a couple highballs down at the Frontier. And by 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he's holding onto the chair with one hand and trying to cut hair on the head between the 2 that he sees. And it was pretty bad. And then the other barber next to the theater, he was just a great old man, but he scared the absolute holy hell out of me as a kid to go in there, because he was a World War I vet that had really bad palsy in one arm. And he'd use a straight razor to trim their sideburns.
Oh my God. Oh.
And so he'd hold the bad hand with his good hand, and he was just as smooth as silk. But every time I went in there, I knew I was going to see an ear on the floor. But it was a different kind of town, and it kind of grew on me. It really was special. I had a John Wayne period, and I started working ranches and things around here. And I'd come into town courting my wife, and we'd go to the State Theater and go down to Jan's Soda Fountain at Kingman Drug when I'd come into town.
Remember that? Like right down at the corner of 4th and Annie
where El
Devine.
Palacio is.
I grew up downtown.
Yeah.
I knew.
So my wife and my wife's my mother-in-law and father-in-law, when they were dating back in the 50s, that's what they had done the same thing. It went. They had dated the same way, going to the same thing. Jan's Soda Fountain, State Theater. It hadn't changed, and of course Sporty's. That's the one thing downtown that's exactly as it was when I was a kid. I don't think.
I've never been to Sporty's.
Really?
What?
Yeah, I've never been.
Whoa, that's
You may not have a chance.
2
now.
out of 5 right now. Right? You've been in Sporties.
Oh, yeah.
You've been in Sporties. No.
I have
never
no
been
interest.
in Sporties.
What are you waiting
I
for?
don't know.
Well, for one thing, it's closed right now.
You
I know,
gotta- you have to see it.
Yeah, they're
Oh
not.
my God.
No,
But
a
anyway.
little inside info. Jim and I used to work together. I'm not going to say where we used to work together,
Right.
but it wasn't the most pleasant job. But could you imagine every day if I needed to get away from the customers, I would go over and talk to Jim? Could you imagine? I got to hear these stories every single day.
Nice.
It was awesome.
That would be cool.
This is how this whole thing started with Jim Hinkley's America. I've had people tell me that I can do this all day and enjoy myself, even if I'm the only one in the room. And that I seem to have a gift for telling people where to go. So that's how this whole thing got started. But
Yeah, like I'm a fan of your walking tours. I did one of the where we walked around and you told us what the old buildings used to be. That was super cool. Whenever tourism gets back up,
yes.
should keep doing
that. You did a
those.
virtual one yesterday, didn't you?
Yeah, I did one the other day, kind of a virtual tour downtown, trying to get interest in working with Desert Wonder Tours. I offer walking tours downtown and things of that nature. And
We touched on it briefly a few minutes ago, but can you clear up the Clark Gable myth?
well, I don't like to kick legends to the curb.
Ow.
If you go down the street here below, next to the let's see, it'd be 5th Street. It's now a county building. I can't remember what the county building is, but it was the Methodist Episcopal Church. And it's on the corner of Spring and 5th, next to the Benelli House across. There's a little plaque. Clark Gable and Carol Lombard married there in March 1939 and had a little reception at the Brunswick Hotel. And then they followed Highway 466 up through Las Vegas and over to California. And they were in Los Angeles the next morning at 8 o'clock for a press interview. So the legend is they honeymooned in Oatman.
Right.
I want to hear
Yeah.
more of this.
Well, so
Oatman says that too.
Yeah.
it must have been an awful
I saw
short
the sign.
honeymoon. That's all I can say.
Right?
That story never showed up in Oatman until the 1960s when they renamed the hotel and a fellow bought it. And mysteriously, the guest register that he had burned up in a shed fire. But it works. It's a legend and sells things. But it would have been an awful short honeymoon.
Yeah. I mean, how long would it take to drive from here to California on 66 at that time?
Man, it's a long run. I mean, got through Oatman and whatnot, cars, traffic, and you got to consider the traffic. The road was only part of the deal. Think of the traffic that was on that road. In 1939, the Arizona Highway Department first time clocked 1 million cars entering Arizona on Route 66 in a 12-month period.
Wow.
Think about that, going up through Oatman and things, 1 million cars a year on that road.
I know that road's pretty treacherous.
Yes.
Although I went for the first time a few months ago, I went on the other side from Oatman to Topak, and I was driving a new Mustang, and boy, that was a fun drive.
Yeah. The roads, now you can enjoy it. Route 66 today, you can have your cake and eat it too. You can have fun on Route 66, and when you get tired of it, you can jump on the interstate. You don't have to just put up with it. You don't have to baste in your own juices as you cross the desert without air conditioning. And
I always wondered that about you. I was like, when you're doing this travel from, say, to here to Cuba, do you stay on 66 or do you hop off?
it depends. It depends on my schedule. Last year, I had a really brutal schedule. I had a tour company here from New Zealand on Tuesday morning. I had a brunch with them, and I finished up and I hit the road. And I had to be in Michigan noon on Friday for a presentation, so I just pretty much did the old truck driving thing and just drove. Coming back, I did a lot of Route 66,
Right, I imagine that has really slowed down this year.
Dramatically, depending on who you talk to, international tourism is roughly 60% of Route 66, and there is no international travel. Probably won't be. To kind of backtrack a little bit there with Oatman Road. Believe it or not, I not only learned to ride a bicycle out there, I learned to drive on that road. And my first paying job was for Ed Edgerton up at Ed's camp.
Speaking of highways, so at the end of your book, it says that Route 66 is not America's longest highway. What is?
Well, it was US 6. US 6 started in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and went all the way to Long Beach, California.
Oh, wow.
But they truncated that road now at Bishop, California. but it still runs from Bishop, California, all the way to Cape Cod, Massachusetts.
Wow. I've never driven on that
I
one.
should have known that.
Route 66 is not our most historic, most scenic highway, but it's always, so from its inception, it's always had the best press and publicity. And it's developed a life of its own. And of course, I mean, when you think about it, it's a highway that officially does not even exist anymore. And yet they have an event in Czech Republic with 20,000 people from 10 countries celebrating American music, cars, and Route 66.
Right. Why do you think it is that way? Why is so much
Yeah, why are they
on
fascinated?
66? Why is it such an international?
Well, there's a multitude of reasons. It's come to symbolize the ultimate American experience, the freedom of the road, things of this nature. For some of the folks, I was privileged. I was attending a conference, an economic development conference in California, and Zdeněk Jurasik of the Czech Republic, Czech Route 66 Association. Man, even in his broken English, he had people. There wasn't a dry eye in the house. He was talking about growing up in a communist country, and listening to Radio Free Europe, watching bootleg copies of Easy Rider, things of this nature. And he said for his generation, Route 66 came to symbolize what the Statue of Liberty did for a previous generation. I thought, oh man, that's pretty powerful stuff.
Right, and it's also got in movies. Like movies have been filmed around here. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, that was filmed
We've got,
out near the airport, right?
yeah, we've got at last count close to 100 major motion pictures that have been filmed all or in part here, plus celebrity associations, going back to 1918
Really?
with Harry Carey. Nothing to do with suicide. There was actually an actor named Harry Carey. And he filmed a couple movies here. 1918 at Tab Duncan's place out by Hackberry. And did another one probably around 22. Buster Keaton stayed at the Hotel Beale and filmed a movie. You can see it on YouTube called Go West. And he filmed that movie out of Tab Duncan's ranch, which is now the Grand Canyon Western Ranch. Used to be the Diving Bar.
Wasn't part of Mars Attacked?
Part of Mars Attack was here. Two great movies that you can watch if you're into old stuff. You want to see Kingman the way it was. Edge of Eternity, 58, 59. That was an Academy-nominated film, but it was all filmed in the Kingman area. Downtown Kingman, the courthouse, everything. And the final scene was up at the Grand Canyon West on the cable car going across the Grand Canyon that was built there.
You had something there?
I remember when they filmed Roadhouse 66,
I
they
saw
were
that.
doing the drag races
Yes.
right down, it's not, is it 4th Street or 3rd Street? It's 4th Street,
Fourth
right?
Street.
Fourth.
Yeah.
It's
And they go out.
the street I
over-
walk down every day when I go to Circle K to get coffee and donuts. Because I grew up right down on 5th Street, and they were just like filming drag races all up and down all day. The movie crews were out, and I saw them. I remember that. And
They filmed the interior scenes at the tavern, and then the exterior scenes were at that old roadhouse across the tracks over on Old Trails Road.
what?
And I got involved with that. I had just come back to Kingman. It was one of the best jobs I ever had, being a good capitalist. I got the best job in the world. They wanted tumbleweeds for this one scene, the junkyard scenes. They didn't feel there was enough tumbleweeds. And I was in between jobs because the mines had shut down. So in the daytime, I was cutting brush up here on Lynette Drive for this lady. And they were paying me to haul all this tumbleweeds and dead brush out there. And they had these big catering trucks with food. So I was getting paid at both ends of the cow.
Nice. What made you get into writing?
I've always wanted to write. When I was a kid, I just loved books. I still try to read at least 2 books a month on a variety of subjects. And my dear wife, she encouraged me. She's back in 1990. And she says, why don't you try writing some of this stuff down? And typical me, I'm one of these folks that I don't read instructions. And so when I put the bicycle together for the kids at Christmas and the handlebars where the seat goes, then I get out the instructions. Well, I did the same thing with writing. Are you familiar with Hemmings Motor News? Hemmings Classic Car. It's one of the top automotive magazines in the country. And automotive history is pretty much how I started writing, and I became kind of a specialist with 1885 to World War II automotive history. And so I just, instead of sending a query letter, all the things you're supposed to do, I just picked up my favorite magazine and called the editor, and we talked for a half hour, and next thing you know, I sold a story, and I got up my 1948 Underwood typewriter and Kmart camera and took some pictures of this wrecking yard.
What kind of typewriter?
1948 Underwood typewriter.
Now you're talking Aaron.
Do you still have it?
No.
He wants to buy one.
But
I have my Smith Galaxy 2. I thought I broke it, but I realized that I didn't set the... there's that part where you separate the red tape from the black tape.
yes.
And I'm like, oh, fucking thank God it works again.
Right, so you're up and running again.
It was fairly.
I was going to bring it over here, and I'm like,
that's-
oh my God. I was just like so relieved. I hate typing on computers. I hate typing on laptops. There's something about a typewriter that just makes it so much more complete and soulful. I don't know. What do you write on? I mean,
I haven't written on paper for 15 years. And, to be honest, I joke about modern Amish, but I didn't even have a cell phone until about 6 years ago.
right.
I had a Leave It to Beaver rotary phone on the wall until about 8 years ago. Avocado green.
Nice. I think my grandma still has one of those.
My wife and I were married probably more than 20 years before I had a truck that was manufactured after I was born. And I just, always done the old stuff. But writing on the computer to me is a lot better. I also, keep a journal with pencil and paper. But
Yeah.
typewriter, carbon paper, all that stuff is, it's a challenge. I mean, trying to do some of this stuff. And
Do you keep these with you sometimes?
oh yeah, I've always got pencil and paper going, and but out of the writing, I started out. It's as you know, it doesn't pay much, but it's incredible adventure. Just astounding. It's gotten me into interviews with Jay Leno in Jay Leno's garage. It's got me.
Yeah, I was
Yeah, I
going to
remember those
ask about
stories.
that.
It got me to Europe. On multiple
Yeah.
occasions, speaking engagements and things in Europe. Friendships all over the world. It's the money is not there, but it's
Yeah,
the
you
rest
got
of it.
that right.
So, have you pretty much been everywhere? Like to every country?
Oh no, not even started. Mexico and Canada. I used to run when I was driving trucks. I'd run trucks in the United States and Canada, just across the border up Duluth, Thunder Bay, up in the North Country, and spent a little bit of time. I used to work along the Mexican border when I was working ranches, and we'd go down to Mexico quite a lot, and then Europe, Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Slovakia.
Yeah, that's quite a few places.
Yeah.
Way more than I've been to.
I never could have imagined when I was living on that road out there in the middle of the desert and working for old man Edgerton that road would take me that far.
Let's talk about the Jay Leno. What happened there?
This is it's the story of my life. It really sums up everything. When I quit driving trucks, I decided I'd never go to LA again. And so I never went over Cajon Pass. I'd stop at either Victimville or Hysteria. I just never went any further. And there's a bookstore in Burbank over on Magnolia Boulevard. Been there since the 50s. It's a tremendous bookstore. Auto books, aero books. You can buy new and used books all the way back. Auto repair manuals back 1903. It's an incredible bookstore.
Nice.
But I'd never been there. I knew of it. And I was working this rental car agency here in Kingman and sold some of my books there at the time. The owner did. Fellow broke down and he rented a car and bought one of my books, and he came back 2 days later and he says, I really like this book. And it was a Seinfeld kind of book, the big book of car culture. It was about nothing. History of highway striping, the history of seat belts, just oddball stuff. And he says, do you know if they sell this at Auto Books, Aero Books? And I said, no idea. And at the time I had a part-time job. I was associate editor for Cars and Parts magazine. And anyway, he says, asked me if they sold my book at Auto Books, Aero Books. And I told him I had no clue. And so he says, well, let me check. The owner, Tina Van Kuren, was his neighbor. So he calls her up and she says, yeah, we sell books. She puts me on the phone with her and she says, we'd like to have you come over for a book signing sometime. And I knew of the store. And every Saturday they have what they call a cruise in. People just show up with their cars and they have a book signing. But it was the big boys, Carol Shelby, these kind of people who go there to this bookstore. And she books it 6 months in advance. So I wasn't, I said, well, I'll do a book signing. Just call me sometime and I'll wander over to Burbank. And about 3-4 weeks later, she says, I know this is short notice. It's Tuesday. She says, I've had a cancellation this Saturday. Can you come over and sign books? And on Friday, the day before I left, Brad Bowling, the editor at Cars and Parts magazine, he said, would you like to write our feature for us on Doble steam cars? I says, yeah, I can do that. It says, I'm heading out for California tomorrow. And he says, well, that's even better. There's a new museum opening in El Segundo, the Automobile Driving Museum. Can you cover that this weekend? So I was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Well, the short version of this thing is I do a quick research on Doble. I knew a little bit about the Doble steamers, but I found 2 really interesting things. And I don't believe in the Easter Bunny, but sometimes you just got to wonder about coincidence. I found out that Jay Leno had just recently purchased one of the last, there's only like 6 or 7 Dobles in the world. He had just bought one. And I found out that he was such a regular at that cruise in, at that store in Burbank, that even though they're limited on parking, they've reserved a space out front for him. Now, in my imagination, fill in the blanks, I'm thinking, well, this is too much of a coincidence. I'm going to do an article on Doble. I'm going to meet Jay Leno and do an article on Doble. I mean, how does this happen otherwise? I sign books, Jay Leno never shows up. And I stay as late as I can and still have time to get to El Segundo. I sign a copy of Cars and Parts magazine and say, sorry I missed you. I wanted to talk about your Doble. My wife and I get home Sunday night, and she says, on the answering machine, she says, you got to hear this. And it's Jay Leno. He says, I'm sorry I missed you. He showed up 15 minutes after I left. And of the hundreds and hundreds of cars that he's owning, he shows up in his new Doble steam car. 15 minutes after I left. Well, it gets better. And this will amuse you as a writer. At the time, he was doing a program called Jay Leno's Garage Book Club, interviewing automotive authors and writers and things. And he was intrigued because the articles I had written for Cars and Parts was in our series of articles called The Independent Thinker. Strange stories, unusual people like the blind man who invented cruise control. And anyway, I had written a book on Checker, and I had written the book on the Big Book of Car Culture. About 6 months into this, I get a call from Jay Leno's producer of this program. And he says, do you think you can come over and do an interview at Jay's garage for this? Well, it took me 3-4 months to coordinate our schedules. Well, in the meantime, in that 3 or 4 month period, when we finally got the schedule straight, about 3 weeks before I went over there, everything got confirmed. I called my publisher, all excited. The Big Book of Car Culture took the gold medal at the International Automotive Media Awards, but it sold really poorly. So I called my publisher, all excited. I says, I know this book has sold bad. Man, have I got an opportunity. And he says, gosh, I wish that would have happened last month. We've decided not to reprint, and we've remanded all copies to Sam's Club.
Oh, God.
So now I've got an interview with Jay Leno and no book. So we promoted the book anyway, and the Checker Cab book, and got into Jay's garage. And I'm not going to say we're best friends, but he shows up I do a book signing every year in Burbank. Maybe not this year. And he shows up
on the podcast.
And he'll call me up.
Call him right now.
Yeah, you guys remember?
No, I don't. But I'll tell you another one. Do you remember the movie, the kid with the Red Ryder BB gun, Christmas Story?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
You'll put your eye out.
Exactly.
I love that movie.
And he got the Annie the Orphan Annie decoder ring, and he was all excited. Well, the day before I left over for Jay Leno's garage, I just like a little kid. His producer called me up and gave me the gate key, the gate numbers for Jay Leno's garage when I got there. And of course, I feel privileged.
Right.
Until I get there and find that the numbers are scratched in the side of the box because Jay and some of the people can't remember the numbers. And I thought, well,
Why didn't even write it down for you? It's like, hey, it's
His
written on the
garage
box.
is awesome as
it's amazing. It's a series of garages. It's quite a few. He's a very, very fascinating fellow. He works on his own cars. It's just an amazing place. And the relationship is odd. I'm not going to say we're friends, but when I sign books, he usually shows up, and he'll call me just out of the blue. I'll get a phone call, like in December, and he says something strange, like Sunday night, 9:00. I'll get a call and says, "Are you familiar with that 1940 Pontiac that was made with clear plexiglass that was at the World's Fair?" And he says, "I thought you might want to know I bought that." "Well, I got to go." And then he'll call me up a year later, and we'll talk for 2 hours about steam engines.
You're his go-to guy for car stuff, man.
It's just odd,
Or old car
But
stuff.
that's the kind of thing, with this writing. That's some of the great rewards that come with it.
You start meeting people, you start talking to people, and
Yeah.
I think telling a story in general is just it. You're right. It doesn't pay shit. It pays absolutely.
Unless you're like the 1%. Yeah.
Well,
Kind of like what
But-
we're doing here.
it opens doors. It opens incredible doors.
You meet some great people. Yeah.
You do. I went to Europe the first time in 2015, and I was there for 2 weeks. My total out-of-pocket expenses were less than $800, all because of this. And I got paid to go to speak at one of the largest tourism fairs in Western Europe, and
Wow.
so it opens doors.
It's a hobby. I mean, some guys buy, you know what? I'm 44. I'm going to go buy a motorcycle or a fast car that I can't afford, or I'm going to go to like Portland and cover riots, or do something stupid, sleep with homeless people under a bridge. Like, everyone has their kicks, and I think writing is one of them. It is kind of like
You develop
weird drug.
you develop a deeper understanding of the prospector you see in the movies that would wander the desert with his mule until he dropped dead, knowing that the strike is over the next hill, and you just keep going. But no, I adhere to a very simple philosophy with writing and everything in life, in that all of us have gifts and talents, and we have a responsibility and obligation to develop those, to be a blessing unto others. And if it makes money, God bless. But you have that responsibility to develop the talents that you have.
tell their stories.
Yeah.
Tell their stories.
Tell
I
them.
mean, there's so many out there right now. It's
Here-
I'm having a hard time keeping up. Right
You
now.
know, and if we here in Kingman, getting back to tourism, how do we bring tourism back? The stories.
Yeah.
One of the great things that we've been able to do through Scott Dutton's Route 66 Association, I've worked with him, and we hold receptions for these tour groups that come in. Last year we did one for the Dutch Route 66 Association down at Dutton Motors, and we had it catered, had a big dinner, and the chief of police showed up, and the guy with the mayor stopped by. We made a big thing of it. What that does is foster an awareness. Why are people stopping in Kingman on purpose? All the way from the Netherlands, but it fosters that awareness, creates that that interest, and here in Kingman, the stories. We just had a fellow come through Kingman. I couldn't coordinate with him, but he just recently, a week ago, this past Sunday. So he's been on the road almost 2 weeks. Lives in New Hampshire. I can't remember where it was at, New Hampshire. But he just said, I've got 4 weeks before I can start back to work because of this COVID. He's been down most of the summer. He says, I've always wanted to do Route 66. He lives in New Hampshire.
Well, that's
So-
not very interesting.
That's a long drive.
You know what made the
Right.
drive even more
Yeah.
crazy? He's doing it in a stock 1929 Ford.
Oh, dear Lord.
Not last night he stayed in Barstow, California.
Ouch.
He needles the night before.
Oh wow.
But here's this
Even
guy.
worse.
But here's this guy doing this 19. Here's a guy running the road in the 19. Now, look at that story. And the thing is, he's about 35 years old. He's not an old timer.
That's cool though.
Yeah.
It makes when I read your book, I'm like, I want to travel Route 66 and go check out
Yeah.
a lot of those world's biggest
Oh, yeah,
things. I want to go see all those and
Just travel
and
in general.
like just all the old stuff. I like it. I think it's
Springsteen
cool.
talks about it in his book.
What makes Route 66 unique? US 6 is more interesting. I mean, there's more stuff on US 6 than there is 66. But what makes 66 fascinating is the infectious spirit of the people you meet on the road. You meet them traveling. You meet business owners. You meet, it's just astounding, the infectious spirit. This fella today, just on Facebook, was talking about this Route 66 trip he took in his Model A, and he summed it up really nicely. But you meet...
It's because everyone's getting their kicks.
Well, it becomes an absolute a family. For lack of a better word, it becomes literally a family. I was sitting in a little bar in Belgium one night, and this fella come up, started talking to me, and we ended up talking 3-4 hours. And it all started because I gave the bartender some stuff from Route 66. And that's all it took. We ended up having a conversation about the Articles of Confederation, how our government worked, all kinds of things. The Dutch Route 66 Association threw me a little reception at De Praal in Amsterdam. And next thing I know, people that I'd met on the road here, they came all the way from Germany for the party. And it was like a family reunion. This sums it up, if I may, here. I'll share this with you. This is from the fellow who's just driving his 29 Ford. And he started posting daily from the road. And he says, I never would have expected my Facebook posts to take off as they have. This was intended just to keep friends and concerned family in the loop about my trip. I'm doing this trip because I've always wanted to, and I wanted to see America's current state from a different view. I left with no set plans other than I was going to follow Route 66 as much as I could. And all my stops have been random. I know I've missed a lot. I have no chase car. And he says here, the people along Route 66 have been absolutely amazing. Caring people that will go out of their way to make sure you have a great experience in visiting. And it's just mind-boggling. I met a family here on Route 66, signed their book. They were in Las Vegas one year for Thanksgiving, and I went out to a ranch I used to work on for Thanksgiving, and I invited them along. And that's all it took. Route 66 was the link. And a few years ago, I was in Germany, and they picked us up from the airport. They live about 20 miles from Frankfurt. And our 37th wedding anniversary was spent in a castle on the Rhine River.
Awesome.
Because of Route 66. And stories. Aaron, just sit down here on the road and watch the people. French mimes trying to set a stilt walking record from Chicago to Los Angeles. He made it as far as Oklahoma before he had a heat stroke. And I started. My question was,
is this a challenge?
How do you mime for help?
Well, better yet, that's exactly what I thought. How does a French mime call for help in Oklahoma?
You get out of character. That's how you do it.
There was a group of people that did Route 66 recently on pre-1916 motorcycles. I met a World War II veteran. He and his wife had, after the war, gotten married, and they went to California on Route 66 with a 1940 Harley and a sidecar. And they wanted to do the trip again, so they restored a 1940 Harley. She got sick, she died. He had lung cancer. They took out one lung and part of his other lung. And they said, you're not going to do this. The guy lived in North Carolina. He said, no, I'm going to do this. He rigged up his sidecar with his oxygen equipment. And he did Route 66 on his 1940 Harley.
I want to hear more about this
That's awesome.
stuff. That sounds like fun.
Japanese long-distance runner was recreating the Bunyan Derby and just ran Route 66.
Oh my God. All right. I got to get my shit together really fucking quick. Like in the next
I know we
48
deviated there,
hours.
and I do apologize, Michael.
48
I kind of been losing it lately, but I keep
Route
hearing about
66
stuff like
is
this.
bringing you back.
Hey, just a side trip. Aaron, I've been following your posts about the homeless people downtown. This is all I'll say about this, but I want to get this out there. How do you respond to people that say that you're exploiting them?
There's one person that was really ragging me about it. I don't want to name her.
Yeah.
I don't want to call her out. She's like the one person that you're giving them cash money. You're just letting them buy drugs. I'm like, I do not give these people cash.
Right.
You know what? If they're that hurting, I'll go buy water, Gatorade, Circle K hot dogs, beef jerky, nuts, whatever. I will not give them cash because I know.
I don't see how anybody could think of it as anything but a good thing, that what you're trying to do there.
You know what? I'm always going to get one of those assholes who's just going to lay into me.
There's people. Some of these people out here are so easy upset. They're gonna cry if you hang them with a new rope. They're just
Right.
They're gonna complain when they get to heaven. Like they're gonna always have something.
Like
to
95% of people are supporting me right now. Like,
even if
I would
you
say
did,
9 out of 10 people are like, yeah, you go. One's like, well, what the fuck are you doing? Like, taking a picture of some chick smoking meth, man. That's not a good thing. Like, you shouldn't post that. I'm like,
Why are you giving them money?
even if you did give them money, what good is she doing by sitting? Then it's like, then what are you doing to help?
I didn't
If
give
you're
them
gonna
cash.
sit
I
there
took a
and
picture,
call-
and it's one of the best pictures I've ever taken in my fucking life.
I know, but
And
even
it
if you
paints
did
such a
give
huge
them
picture.
money, it's like, what? I love when people call other people out, but it's like, what good are you doing? Like,
Are you
Right.
down hanging out in the fucking
Doing
alleys right now?
nothing.
I'm gonna walk down there right
Yeah.
now in like an hour and go hang out and fucking pass out. You know, I got donations from people like sanitary items.
Right.
the way I see
Like
it is like
water.
you're treating them like human beings. I mean, that's how
Exactly.
I look at
Right.
it when I
Thank
see
you.
your posts.
Let's touch on that a minute. So you're working with a couple people that are gathering supplies for them.
I have,
Yes.
yes.
Well, then see what's wrong with that.
There are a lot of supportive people here, and I'm actually surprised. I'm happy considering the amount of negativity in this town when it comes to stuff like,
Right.
You know what?
Well,
You just got to ignore the
fuck
haters.
those people, you know, they're just a bunch of drunks and junkies and they just need to put down the bottle and the needle. It's like,
Right.
no, it's not that easy.
I think that the majority of people here are good people, though. I think
Yeah.
that it's just a few loudmouths that kind of ruin it. But are you really going to embed with them?
No.
No. That's a good answer.
I'm not supposed to.
Shut up.
All right, we'll leave it at that for right
Fucking
now.
go home.
Right.
So, Jim,
I know we deviated a little bit here.
yeah,
and
we
there.
kind of we call it off-roading.
Yes.
But we were talking about this before we turned this thing on, but I wanted to touch on it. You were saying that we might not get tourism back fully for like 2 years.
Longer than that, but I mean, we probably won't see, if we get a handle on things, including the societal unrest as well as the virus. If we get a handle on that, we can start seeing tourism next summer, but it's going to be a small percentage. But I've preached this for a long time. In Route 66 communities, I speak on economic development. You have two distinct markets: the international and the domestic, and Route 66 is the common denominator. But you think about a domestic market. People are doing staycations, weekend getaways, things of that nature. So they want something within 300-400 miles of home. That gives us a potential market of over 10 million people that we could be reaching out to.
Okay. One of the subjects, not get too political on this subject today, but we've touched on is the fight downtown, whether it's mask mandates or not mask mandates, that have slowed business down. And I've made the argument is it's a lot of the lack of tourism has really hurt that aspect of it.
Yeah, it's everything. I mean, you got the people who are going to argue and fight over the mask mandate. That's part of it. You've got people who are
Afraid.
exactly paranoid.
Yeah.
They're as nervous as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. They're just not gonna go anyplace.
Right. That's why I don't go out.
And then the tourism being down, and then the random and arbitrary shutdowns of businesses. Like here in Kingman, we have Diana's is closed, Blackbridge is open.
Right.
And this kind of thing. So it's a multitude of things. There's a lot of people to blame, but my thought on this right now is the blame game and all that stuff is after you've won the war. Right now, it's a matter of fix things, and we'll worry about the rest of it later.
Right.
Yes.
And I don't see why like after 9/11, we all kind of came together and we all didn't have that political division for at least a few months.
For like 2 weeks.
2 weeks,
Yeah.
whatever it was.
Out
But
here, it was like 2 weeks.
it seems like in a crisis like what we're going through now is we would come together instead of getting further separated. And I just don't understand that concept.
Yeah, that probably to me is one of the most troubling aspects of what we're dealing with. And there again, there's plenty of people we can blame. We can pull from Will Rogers and just look at that we have the best politicians money can buy. But bottom line is, it's personal. And people, this is what they've chosen to allow themselves. Politics by nature is very nasty and divisive. And it's international. Politics, wherever you're at, it's like cleaning stables. It comes in different colors, but it all smells about the same. And it's up to the people, if they're going to allow themselves to be divided. It's up to them to do the research and to be informed and to realize that the people that you are putting these conservative, Democrat, whatever labels, and they're your neighbors, and they're as concerned as you are about their kids, their future. And until we get to that point, the divisions will continue.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always said is deep down we all want conservative, Democrat. We all want the same things. We want to be healthy. We want our families to be healthy. We want to, do well in life and not struggle. And it seems very basic, but for some reason it's not.
Well, that's universal. You find when you travel, you can sit down with people all over the world, and if you cut through the BS, that it all comes down to the same things. It's a matter of how we get there. And this situation we're in is pretty serious. The division's probably one of the most disturbing things we have right now. And politics by nature is divisive. It's kind of like being a car salesman on steroids. How do you convince somebody a Ford's better than a Chevy? They're really basically the same thing. But it's the salesmanship. How do you convince somebody? Well, so politics by nature is divisive. And if we have to go beyond that and see it as neighbors.
Well, this was great today. It's really fun. And so everybody, please check out Jim's books, Murder Mayhem on the Main Streets of America. You can find it on Amazon or Jim Hinkley's America. You can find Jim Hinkley on Facebook. You can find Jim Hinkley's America on Facebook. And is there any other social media platforms?
Yeah, JimHinkley'sAmerica.com, then Instagram, Twitter.
Yeah, the Instagram I really like. You just finished the 365 days of Jim Hinkley, which was always interesting.
Yeah. I've been watching those.
So now I'm doing a decade with Jim.
Yeah.
But I have that going, YouTube channel.
And what's on the YouTube channel?
Well, I do the Coffee with Jim programs on Sunday morning. I archive them on the YouTube channel. And then other videos on the road, interviews with people, things of that nature. My On the Road program, On the Road with Jim, is sponsored in part by the Uranus Fudge Company and General Store.
Where are they located?
Near St. Robert, Missouri, 166. Did you stop there when you were going through Cuba?
No, I didn't.
It's the ultimate juvenile humor stop.
I want to go.
It's just anything you can think of that goes with Uranus Fudge Company. Louis Keene has done it. He dresses up in Uncle Sam overalls, and it's a full complex. He's got escape rooms, the world's largest collection of circus sideshow memorabilia.
I want to go.
Axe throwing, a great candy shop, fudge shop, and goods. Just you name it. And he's got a hunting and fishing store, camping store, all in this complex. But he's just a master showman. As you can see, I can do this all day. But the county newspaper, one of the small county newspapers, has been in business for years, and like a lot of newspapers, straight down. Louis bought the newspaper and made it free for everybody in the county. But he caught a bunch of flack because he renamed the newspaper the Uranus Examiner. And he had BBC and all kinds of people swarmed the place for interviews. But so now the newspaper is the Uranus Examiner.
I need to rework my game plan here.
All right, let's do a weekend trip to Cuba.
Why not?
Missouri.
I always was able to spend 2 or 3 hours there, but I wish it was longer.
I would it's if they hadn't I could it's a place I could live. It's a comfortable town, and most of the people, everybody I've met, and I've had the opportunity. I up until this summer, I worked with their economic development and tourism angle, and spent sometimes 3, 4, 5 days there. And I would spend 5 days there, never eat in the same restaurant, and never eat a bad meal in a town of 3,500 people.
And just for a reference, that's approximately 2 hours south of St. Louis.
No, a little less. It's about 70 miles west of St. Louis, southwest of St. Louis. Yeah. Yeah. Well, not St. Louis. There again,
Been there.
there's good places and bad.
I like Missouri.
Yeah.
No.
I went to 1 year for a family reunion. We did Table Rock Lake. It's pretty there.
Yeah.
And when you were when I read the chapter about Missouri, it's easy to see why there were so many accidents there. It is like rolling hills. Like you kind of feel like you're driving on a roller coaster.
Well, and then
through Missouri.
take those roads. There again, Missouri, Arizona, wherever, and now put 1 million vehicles, and not just 1 million vehicles, but think about it. You got a brand new '53 Buick Roadmaster with a V8 engine. And here's Grandpa with his Model A Ford truck, and here's the farmer pulling hay behind his tractor, and then you got 18 wheelers.
Right.
All packed on there, and you've got bridges that, like the Chain of Rocks Bridge in St. Louis, has a 28-degree bend in the middle of the river, and you got 2 lanes of traffic going across that bridge, and you've got no shoulder. It's just a nightmare. I was old enough I came in at the tail end of it, but Route 66 now is a lot more enjoyable, a lot more fun.
I'm gonna have to go. Did you go to the place where it has I can't remember what state it was in, but when I watched that little trip, they had a place that had sodas, and they had over hundreds of different flavors of sodas. Like the
Pops in Arcadia, Oklahoma. With a big soda pop bottle out front.
I gotta go there.
There's 2. There's one closer for you that's not talked about. Galago's store in Los Angeles, Highland Park area of Los Angeles. Store's been there. It's a family-owned store since the 1890s. But it's a beautiful old-style butcher shop and a huge, monstrous section of most bizarre soda pops you've ever seen. And then another section with just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different kinds of beer.
Cool.
But the one in Arcadia is kind of a blending of the Jetsons and 1950s malt shop. But you can get all kinds of things like bacon-flavored soda and
I've tried that.
celery soda.
It's not as good as it sounds.
It doesn't sound good.
No, it doesn't sound good.
Kosher.
It really doesn't sound good.
In theory, it sounds great, but in practice, I tried it. I think I got it in San Luis Obispo, and I drank 2 drinks of it, and I'm like, just immediately went to the next sewer grate and spewed it up all over the place.
Yeah, there's a bar in Las Vegas, the Double Down, that has a bacon martini.
Double Down.
Yeah. Some bands when I was a roadie briefly for a small band here, we played there.
Is that where we went?
Did we go there? They
you
also
guys
have a
meet
shot
at the
called
Double
Ass
Down?
Juice.
What's that?
Have you both been to the Double Down?
It's kind of called the Double Dump. It's over by one of the Naked City.
I know where the
Pizza
Double
All right,
locations.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's in that
Yes,
area.
thank you. It's been good. I hope this helps.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for coming on, and
Yeah,
we'll
thank you.
definitely have you back because you have a lot of stories you can tell.
Thank you.
And we really appreciate you.
Definitely.
And hopefully we'll get back on track here soon, and we'll get back to some kind of normalcy.
We'll get on the other side of the
Fingers
apocalypse
crossed.
and
Yeah.
see what's on the other side.
Did you see 2 hurricanes are coming into the
Yes.
Gulf of Mexico?
At once.
at once.
Amazing stuff.
They're going to duke it out.
This year, man, 2020.
Well, they get close to each other, they'll do this circle around each other. Dance.
Can we bet on them?
Why
Is there
can't they
like a way to
cancel
like
each other
go to
out by
Vegas?
No,
doing
they
that?
they don't. They
That'd
all
be
go the
cool.
same direction, but when they
Oh.
do, they'll kind of start circling around each other and doing like a dance in a cycle. It happens all the time in the Pacific. It's just there in the it just never happened there in the Gulf.
The
like that.
double hurricanes and fire tornadoes.
It's crazy.
Thanks, 2020.
Yeah. All right.
Oh.
All right. Well, we will check in again next week, but take it easy, everybody, and we'll see you later. All right.
Bye, y'all.